A black rancher returned home after weeks away tending to cattle in another state, only to find an HOA, Karen, standing at the edge of his property, clipboard in hand and an air of superiority on her face. She had already filed multiple complaints with the local HOA board, accusing him of trespassing on what she believed was restricted land. When he calmly explained it was his ranch, passed down for generations, she scoffed and dialed the police, confident that her word carried more weight than his deed. But what she didn't know was that this man wasn't just any landowner. He was a senior federal official tasked with overseeing every homeowners association in the country. While she ranted about rules and violations, he quietly pulled out identification that could freeze entire boards, dissolve corrupt HOAs, and place entire neighborhoods under investigation. When the police arrived, expecting to drag off some rule breaker, they instead saluted the man they recognized immediately. Karen's smug grin faltered as the officers turned their attention to her. Within minutes, she went from accuser to being investigated for harassment, unlawful interference, and even filing false reports. What began as her attempt to humiliate him turned into a lesson that spread across the entire state's HOA network. You never know who you're dealing with, and this time, she had picked a fight with the man who wrote the rules she worshipped. The sun dipped low on the horizon as the old pickup truck rumbled down the dusty country road, its tires crunching over gravel that hadn't been disturbed in weeks. Behind the wheel sat a man with skin weathered from years of working cattle, his broad hat tilted low to shade his eyes. He was returning to his ranch, land that had been in his family for generations, land that carried the sweat, history, and legacy of his bloodline. For him, every fence post, every blade of grass, and every hoofbeat that echoed in the open pastures was part of his story. But as he pulled up to his gate, he immediately noticed something different, a woman standing there, clipboard in hand, scribbling like she owned the place. Her name was Linda, though around the neighborhood, everyone just called her Karen. She had a reputation. She was the kind of woman who thrived on enforcing rules that weren't hers to enforce, the type who thought every square inch of land needed her approval before it could be lived on, worked on, or even breathed on. She had recently been elected to her HOA board, and she carried that authority like it was a badge, convinced that her word was law. Now, here she was, planted in front of his ranch gate, squinting at his truck as though sizing up an intruder. When he stepped out, stretching his stiff legs, she didn't even bother with a greeting. "Excuse me," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the evening air. "You can't be here. This is a private community, and this property falls under HOA jurisdiction. You're trespassing." The man looked at her, then at the sprawling ranch behind him. He let her words hang for a moment before replying. "Ma'am, this land's been in my family longer than your HOA's been alive. I'm not trespassing. I'm home." Karen scoffed, clicking her pen like a weapon. "That's not possible. According to our records, this land is unoccupied, and our association has rules about maintaining unused property. You're in violation, and if you don't leave, I'll be forced to call the authorities." Her tone carried the kind of smug confidence that came from years of intimidating neighbors into silence. She expected him to argue, to get flustered, maybe even to pack up and leave to avoid trouble. But instead, he leaned against his truck, calm as the setting sun. "You do what you need to do," he said quietly. "But you're making a mistake." That only made her angrier. With a huff, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911, narrating loudly for effect. "Yes, I'd like to report a trespasser. He's refusing to leave private property and is becoming aggressive." She made sure to raise her voice on that last part, as though speaking it into existence would make it true. The man didn't move, didn't even bother to argue. He just stood there, arms crossed, eyes fixed on her like he was watching a child throw a tantrum. If anything, there was the faintest trace of amusement in his expression, as though he'd seen this performance before. Within minutes, the distant whine of sirens carried across the open fields. Karen straightened her shoulders, satisfied. To her, this was victory. The cavalry was coming, and they would take her side, as they always did. She pictured the officers arriving, demanding this stranger show ID, hauling him off for daring to defy her authority. The squad car rolled up, lights flashing, dust swirling in its wake. Two officers stepped out, hands resting casually on their belts. They approached the scene, their eyes flicking between Karen, who was already waving them over, and the tall man leaning on his truck. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," Karen gushed, her voice dripping with false relief. "This man is trespassing on HOA property. I've already filed reports about this land, and he's refusing to leave. He's been hostile and uncooperative." The officers listened, their expressions neutral, before turning to the rancher. "Sir, can we see some identification?" one of them asked politely. The man nodded slowly, reaching into his jacket pocket. Karen smirked, convinced that the moment of reckoning had arrived. But when he pulled out his wallet and handed over a leather-bound credential, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The officers glanced at it, their eyes widening slightly, and then straightened their posture in a way Karen had never seen before. "Yes, sir," one of them said quickly, handing the credential back with both hands. "We weren't aware. Is everything all right here?" Karen blinked in confusion. "What do you mean, sir? He's trespassing. He doesn't belong here. This is HOA land, and I demand you remove him immediately." The taller officer turned to her, his expression now edged with irritation. "Ma'am, this man has federal authority over homeowners associations across the United States. If anything, he outranks every HOA board in the country, including yours." The words hit her like a slap. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again, but no sound came out. She had no idea who she was dealing with. The man she had just accused of trespassing wasn't some random rancher. He was the one who oversaw every HOA's compliance, the one who could audit, dissolve, or prosecute entire boards for misconduct. The rancher finally pushed himself off his truck, taking his time as he walked closer. His boots crunched on the gravel with steady, deliberate steps. "I tried to tell you," he said evenly, his eyes meeting hers. "This land is mine, and your HOA doesn't have a say in what happens here. But you didn't want to listen. Instead, you lied to the police and wasted their time." Karen's face burned red. She tried to salvage her authority, jabbing her pen toward him. "Well, you still didn't file the proper maintenance reports. The grass, the fencing, it's against regulations." The officer cut her off sharply. "Ma'am, I'd suggest you stop talking. You're on the verge of obstruction and harassment charges. Do you realize who you just tried to report? He can shut down your entire HOA with a phone call." For the first time, Karen's confidence faltered. Her pen shook in her hand, and she took a half step back. She looked at the rancher again, but now there was no trace of smugness left, only fear. She had picked the wrong battle, and deep down, she knew it. The man tipped his hat, a slow smile spreading across his face. "This is just the beginning, ma'am. You wanted rules. You'll get them. But this time, they won't be yours." The officers nodded respectfully before returning to their car, leaving Karen standing frozen at the gate, her clipboard hanging uselessly at her side. The rancher climbed back into his truck and drove through his gate, the sound of it closing behind him echoing like the final word. For Karen, the lesson was clear. In her obsession with power, she had crossed the one person in the country who held more authority than she could ever dream of. And for the rancher, it was just another day, another reminder that his family's land, his legacy, and his authority weren't up for negotiation.